Hello and welcome to the God XP Spiritual Fitness Podcast. I am your host, Anthony Polanco. This episode is a conversation with Danny White. Danny is a founding member of the Clapping Monkeys, Kirtan and Conscious Music Band. Danny is a founder, director of Temecula Yoga Collective. Danny is a fascinating story of transformation, recovery from addiction, yoga philosophy, and passion for teaching and training teachers. I'm honored to share this conversation with you about music, recovery, yoga, teaching, and life. Without further ado, enjoy. Hey everybody, welcome back to the God XP Spiritual Fitness Podcast. I am your host, Ant P, Anthony Polanco if you prefer. I'm here with the inimitable Danny White. He is one of the owners of Temecula Yoga Collective, where he also teaches. He is one of the founding members of the Clapping Monkeys, Kirtan and Conscious Music Band. And we have a lot of similarities in our story and our path in life. So very honored to have you on the show, Danny. How you doing?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing well today, Aunt P. And, it's funny. A few weeks back, before you even contacted us, I was just scrolling through YouTube and this thing came up. I think it said God XP or something, and it caught my eye because the XP, being a computer guy, I was like, XP? I wonder what
Nice.
and I threw it up there, and it was this guy in a forest, with this nice setting and these instruments, and he just started looping. I was like, whoa, this is cool. And the filming of it and the music, and I was like, that was cool. And then, I just went on doing my other thing, and then I get an email from Anthony looking to, do some collaboration down here in Temecula area, and it didn't even dawn on me. And then we had our meeting last week, and we're talking. I was like, there's a vaguely familiar look to you, Anthony. I don't know what it is.
Wow.
And then I went back home, and I'm just scrolling through YouTube, and I was check my history because there was a couple things I wanted to rewatch. And there you were, and I put it up again. I went, oh my goodness, that was you.
Wow, that's amazing.
It was funny, and I just love how the universe just kind of moves and kind of weaves what it wants to see. And if we're in that flow, we don't fight it. We just kind of go with it. And the people we're supposed to be around and the situations we're supposed to be in just happen.
That is so amazing. Yeah, I just can't even believe it, stories like that. Not that they come often, but just, how the synchronicities happen, and just the internet is massive. You can't even fathom. That is so amazing. Wow. Yeah. Wow, that's a cool one. That's a really surprising thing, because we had that whole conversation the other day.
Yeah, and I'm like, what? And then there you are, laying down this awesome groove, and I really enjoyed it too. So
Sick.
That was great.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, for people who don't know, I just started making some mantra music with live looping. I've been doing live looping for years, but I just finally, I guess, built up the courage, or just had the realization of bringing mantras into it. And I worked on it for most of this year before putting that video out just about a month ago. I was doing live streams, but it just sounded terrible. You could tell I was just experimenting.
Yeah.
And finally found the sound and just started rolling with it. And feels like I've struck a chord with people. A music that has purpose is stickier. When I was just making generic pop songs, not that they weren't good, but it's harder to get behind something that's just very broad reaching. But the mantra, there's people who really value mantra music, and so it's a lot stickier, I'm feeling.
I love what you say about sticky, and for me it's kind of like that repetitiveness. As you probably have the same thing as everyone does, this live looping thing going on our head, and it's usually self-limiting thoughts and behaviors like, why did you do this and how do you do that? And I found that my love of music and getting hooked into a song, and you get this phrase of a song, and for me it just kind of repeats over and over again. Sometimes it's annoying, but it's there, and it's like it kind of takes over the thoughts. But then I found with the mantra is it's like the most purest repetitive sound that you could have. And, the way we do our kirtan and how I see you doing yours is like you just have that repetitive phrase, that repetitive sound. And it's like, and your mind is like, well, what does so hung mean? You know, who cares? Yeah, there's a great meaning to it, but it's finally the mind is released of all these types of things.
Yeah.
It just
Yeah.
spills into something. And, you know, for the longest time, I'm kind of an emotional guy, and I love these songs about love and yearning and wanting, and like, I can't live if living is without you. And you kind of think love is this highest form of, let me just meditate on love. And I
Yeah.
started reflecting on that once, is like, I can sit there and meditate on love and all the people that loved me and all the loves that I had. But inevitably, and maybe it's my programming or something, what starts to happen is the loves I no longer have, people that are gone that I used to love, and that type of thing. And that might be just unique to me or a
Conditional though.
yeah.
Conditional.
And so it's like, okay, I need to settle on a more purer sound. And so I love that's where the mantras have just kind of really got really sticky for me. And when I'm done chanting or something, that thing is just stuck to me, like you say, you know, for a long time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The first few years of chanting or practicing mantras, so many of my favorite mantras I chanted for years without really diving into. And you know, there's times when I'm doing my meditation and maybe not even feeling it or feeling like, have I gone so far away from this mantra that I don't feel the same connection with it? But it was like you're saying, like the mental grooves in our mind, like sometimes you know, you have these deeper grooves and then you have more shallow grooves where you're needing to still get out of the I guess subconscious mind, you know, the built up conversation.
Yeah.
And so our relationship to a mantra can change over the years, but that's the sweetness of a relationship, is that sometimes you have the everyday and then you have these, you know, vacation moments or like these honeymoon moments, you know.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I love that because, you know, I think it takes, when I first started studying yoga to be a teacher, you know, I was looking around and there was these like really quick, you know, let's go to Mexico or to India or whatever. And in 2 weeks, you'll be a teacher. And now that appealed to my instant gratification kind of person. But then I took my first training in Kundalini yoga, and that was like almost a year long. And what I loved about that is it allowed me to take the practices that I was doing and go through a whole season of life. See how, oh, you know, this is the springtime of my kind of my year, and this is where I'm emerging, and how does the practice meet me there? And then in the fall or the winter, where there's times where there might be a little more depression or introspection, how does the practice meet me there? And I think that's true what you say about your mantras, is they become lifelong companions to you. And sometimes they're there to give you a pat on the back, some encouragement. Sometimes they're there just to hold hands with you and walk down the road. Other times, you know, it seems like you're kind of keeping them going so that they keep the energy going for everyone else. And it's a beautiful relationship that I find with the practices of yoga and the chanting of the mantras.
So why don't you like set the scene for how you came to yoga? You know, I'm sure you have a profound story of how yoga came into your life. You're so devoted to it for so many years.
Yeah.
Just for people listening.
Sure. It's a funny story. I say, it's like I was married. I was on my second marriage. I was pretty much um, a runner and a gunner, as they say, you know, a lot of drinking, drugs, and things like that. And I went through one marriage pretty quick and then just decided to stop all drugs and alcohol. And I was like, you know, I don't have a problem with that. I just need to stop doing it. And I divorced my first wife, bless her soul, she put up with so much, and then got involved in another relationship rather quickly. And without even having any kind of spiritual practice, I just kind of white knuckled my addiction for about 5 years. And my wife at the time, you know, bless her soul too, these very patient women, she saw that the stress I was under, you know, a lot of self-imposed stress, and I was just short, abrupt. I was not introspective. I was very surfacey. I was playing music and having a good time, but I was just still struggling. And she had found this early morning television class of yoga, and she started doing it. And she says, "Hey, Danny, I think if you get up with me early before you have to go to work and do yoga, it's really gonna like really help you." I was like, yeah, whatever, I'll give it a shot. I got up the next morning, just was a total jerk through the whole class, just like, oh, this is dumb. And like, pose, just being annoying. And so later that night, after I got back home, she goes, Danny, maybe if you got that extra hour of sleep, you won't be so stressed out. And that was my first yoga class. And then the relationship broke up and I went back on the rails. I mean, off the rails, a lot of drinking and drugs again for a couple years. And then I was just tired. I was just tired of it. And I checked myself in. I had a good group of friends around me that really loved me. And we had a little intervention and went into treatment and did the whole 30 days in, found AA, I found a new relationship with a higher power. And I got out of that place and I went back to my town where I was at. I had lost my girlfriend, I had lost my house, I lost my job. And but I was blessed to have a little bit of money that I could walk around this small little town up in Eastern Washington and just kind of get clear with things. And it was such a beautiful small town that people knew your story, especially me. I'm not an anonymous alcoholic. I'm right out in the open.
Yeah.
And so these girls had this little small quaint yoga studio in town, and they said, Danny, we know you just got out of treatment, and we think that yoga would be really good for you. And I was like, yeah, what the hell? Let's try it. I went to it the next day and just embraced it. And it was 1 hour of like I'm in Shavasana, the final relaxation pose, and I'm listening to the grooves and I'm kind of tapping out the rhythm on my chest. And they just come up and just say, it's time to relax. And I was like, oh, I thought I was relaxed. And I got up from that class and I was refreshed. And they go, you know what? We need some help around the studio. Maybe you could clean the windows or something. And I go, well, you know what? I'm not really a handyman, but I see you don't have a web presence. I see you don't have a website and you need some technology. How about we do that? Within 6 months from that, I was teaching yoga.
Wow.
And yeah, and from that point, it's been just nonstop studying and chanting. And it's been a life changer along with AA for a number of years. And then just seeing where kind of AA handed me or kind of hand in hand with yoga. And then yoga just kind of took me further.
Wow. Wow. That is so amazing. So these yoga studio owners, they really had no reason to do it. They just did it for service. That's
beautiful souls. Beautiful.
You think
souls.
About what they created,
Yeah.
They gave you a new life in that moment.
They did. And, bless Linda Kennedy, who is the main owner there. She passed away last year from leukemia. And it was a little heartbreaking, but, she lives within me. We had a good relationship. She gave me so much potential.
That's so amazing. I love that story. That is like just such a powerful moment when you really think about it, the impact that it had on you and the impact that you've been able to have on others for so many years with this, technology and wisdom that comes through, discovery of the self and exploration of the self. That's just so amazing. A lot of origin stories, I guess, like they all rhyme in those kinds of ways. Like someone comes into your life and just, gives you something. And for me, I was playing guitar in Monterey, just busking one weekend. I was kind of going through depression and looking for something else to do. So I started busking on the weekends in the coast. And this lady, she was in a wheelchair. She came up to me and started talking to me and kind of told her about my spiritual story. She told me like, you should have you ever tried yoga? And I was like, yeah, I've done it. And I was doing it like on the little pocket yoga app on my phone for a few months, just, trying to, I guess, get more flexible. I wasn't really thinking about a spiritual component at the time. And she said, well, there's this 40-day sadhana thing that I do online. It's a Kundalini yoga. I don't know if you've ever tried it, and I'd never heard of it. And so she just told me that, and it stuck with me. I went home the end of the weekend and I looked it up on YouTube. I just typed in 40-day sadhana. I didn't know anything about Kundalini yoga or anything. And some videos came up. I think they were like 3 HO videos or something. And that was my introduction to Kundalini yoga. I started practicing every day. I fell in love with it. And I think about her all the time. I sent her an email like 18 months later and I said, hey, I'm sure you don't know, but you changed my life in that moment. Like, I've been practicing Kundalini yoga every day since. And I needed that technology so bad in my life. I had nothing. I was living alone. I was working as a night janitor, really.
So
I had no technology, no for spiritual understanding when I really needed it. And, just that moment of fate changed everything,
that's beautiful. I love just it seems like for me, and I've had lots of experiences with other people through the technology of Kundalini, and that was, I was doing regular asana, and it was kind of, they called it yoga fit, so there was no oming in class. There was music that went along, and some of it would have maybe a mantra, but it was more like that chill music that just kind of got you going. And I was teaching just shortly after I started an outdoor class in the summer. And where I was living there, it's a small town, but in the summer it swells up. It's a tourist town. And so I would teach kind of a tourist class out on the grass above the lake on Saturday. And the class had started, and it was like an older population of people that were in it. And I'm just kind of a new teacher, and I'm running them through some stuff, but I'd studied and I've seen all the pictures of all these crazy poses and everything. And this woman comes riding up on her bicycle, just frantic, and throws it down and jumps in and just starts practicing with us. And I'm like, what's up? She goes, I just came from your other studio. I finished a class over there and I wanted to come take another one. I was like, wow, tight.
Wow.
And she goes, very. And then I started just watching this woman practice. And, to my discredit as a teacher, I was just amazed at her practice. And I started throwing out more poses. And she's just all in her own mind, just putting her legs down and doing all of this stuff. And I'm looking at all these older population just kind of looking at me like, ah. I was like, sorry, I've just never seen a real yogi in person.
Wow.
And then afterwards we sat and talked, and she goes, you've got to come up to Canada and try this thing out called Kundalini yoga. And I'm like, sure, when? And like a couple months later, I went up there, and my first experience of Kundalini yoga was just, and I was hooked at that point. I started teaching it in everyday practices and the 40-day sadhanas, and it was so instrumental to my sobriety, my growth, my musical journey with yoga. It was amazing. I love the practice.
Yeah, so good. So good. It's amazing you can go through life without knowing that there's these tools, technologies that are so powerful and for, physical, mental, and spiritual change,
Yeah.
Meditate with me every week online at spiritualfitnessgym.com. You can start with a week, a month, or even a year. I should warn you though, be prepared to transform your meditation practice for good, to make it fun, functional, and powerful. I should also let you know that you're going to get discounts on products and upcoming events. You're going to meet people who could transform your life with collaboration and opportunity. Work directly with me, developing your meditation practice. With that said, and so many other bonuses, go to spiritualfitnessgym.com right now and get started. I'll see you there. That's so cool. Yeah, that's great. So you're playing in bands, going through depression and having these, crises in your life. Were you playing the whole time? Did you ever stop playing?
Yeah, music became integral to my life, 13, 14 years old. And I loved two things. I loved drumming and I loved singing. And I drummed a lot, and that was my primary instrument. And I studied with this amazing drum teacher, but there was a yearning for more I wanted to create. And I loved drums, that you could create an aspect of the song, but I wanted to kind of make some other things. So I started studying other instruments and things like that. But then because of my addictions that started at around 13, 14, it was a struggle. And so music was always this thing that I felt like I had to have my inspiration by going through some of the most worst times. So it's like, let me drag myself through the gutter and I'll come out on the other side with these amazing lyrics and song ideas and stuff. And it was tiring, it was brutal, it was unsatisfying. But it was still this call of nothing else had made me feel so open. And so music kept within my life, even while I went into careers in computers and so forth. And it wasn't until I got into this jazz trio. It was just so wonderful. It was like I was getting sober. I think I was sober at that time. And I was the drummer and the singer. And we just played all the standards, and we played at wineries and little bars and clubs and stuff like that. And it was super fun. But it was still very surfacey. And I didn't really feel the power of what music, the potential could happen or be used for me and others. I'm sure you've experienced this. I was up in Pike's Market up in Seattle. You're sitting there playing guitar, playing your heart out, and people are just walking by. Sometimes you'll engage with them, but it's somewhat soulless in that fact of trying to connect with people. And so, even with the jazz band being out at the wineries and stuff, you were secondary. Not that I needed spotlight, but I just felt like this is a vessel for connecting. And I never got that until I started seeing how music can be used in the spiritual yogic sense. Yeah. And of course, in my younger days, I think as you had too, in church, that I loved. That was my favorite part. Let's sing all through church. Come on, this is where everyone's engaging and making something, and I just loved that.
Yeah, no, totally. It's really profound, that realization that music is meant for connection. I was so self-serving when I was young. Like, I played as early as I could remember. I've been playing, but I was so self-serving that I was always thinking about what I could get from playing better, from being known more for my music. And I totally missed what I was giving and what people were getting from me, because I was looking for what I could get from playing. And it wasn't, I walked away from music for several years because I didn't see the value in playing anymore, because I was always using it to get. And it wasn't until I started making meditation music and mantra music that I realized, like, this is giving. This isn't trying to receive. This is something, music is meant to be given and to be shared. And, I also tried to help people in so many ways that weren't true to myself, like starting a business or, writing and doing different things, which were helpful, but we were always so limited because it wasn't me. Right. And when you're an artist, man, you got to admit who you are, and who you're not is everything else. You got to be you. And so yeah, me too. It was a realization that I've had in my life recently. It's been very freeing to know that, hey, I'm an artist. I'm supposed to be creating art and sharing it, and giving it. And what's more transformative and communal than music? It makes us sing and dance together.
I love that, and I had that similar experience before the jazz band. I just gave up with music, and it was funny. I was going through my second divorce, and I was just decided to, like, I'm getting out all my gear again. And downstairs I had this big room, and I put all this stuff out, my mixers, PAs, guitars, all this stuff. And I'm down there just jamming out one day, and one of my friends was coming by to check out on me. And he was a guy that hung out with me. Him and his wife hung out with me and my wife for 5 years. And he came downstairs, and I didn't notice him. And I looked up, and there he was. His mouth was open. He goes, like, Danny, how long have you played guitar? I'm like my whole life, I guess. He's like, I've known you 5 years. I've never seen you play music. Like, oh, that's what happened. That's what happened. I got away from who I was, totally inauthentic. And so when you say you've got to be authentic, that just so resonates with me.
Yeah. It's one of the biggest challenges an artist faces existentially is, like, how do I contribute to society? And I feel like a lot of artists have to go around a lot of things and come back to that one place. My dad, he's in his late 60s now, and he's still playing. He's been playing his whole life, and never really was monetarily satisfied or rewarded for his musical career. And that's just inherently who he was, and he never gave that up. And I think everyone takes their own path through finding their way to create, but I wonder in his mind, like, what his challenge was to keep that up his whole life. And I think that every artist aspires to have that that lifelong relationship with what they do,
Wow, that's so interesting. My father, I was the youngest of three, and they were really poor growing up. So they were not going to stay poor. So they were going to do whatever they could, work two jobs, mom worked full time, dad's going to work, it's just the kids are going to, we're not going to be poor. We're not going to give our kids that life that we kind of struggled with. Um, and my dad, he was a pastor for the young part of my life, but he wrote a book, and that was his passion, is writing. He wrote a book, and he got it published. And I remember being a young kid sitting around the table. Every month, Dad would start to get a little anxious, and he'd be out there checking the mailbox, and then all of a sudden, this letter would come, and he'd bring it inside, and he'd open it up, and it would be his royalty check. And like, he was just so happy to have had this, like, look at me, I'm an artist, I'm creating, I'm doing something, and I'm preaching, and the book is about, saving souls, and I've got all these other ideas. And mom would look at this check and go, $5.27 doesn't pay the bills, Dad. And so we got to do more than this. And he put down his art, his writing, and for 40 some odd years. As soon as he retired at like 65, he said, now I'm set up. He's 84 right now, and he's published 14 books.
Wow.
I'm like, dude, what patience, what delayed gratification. And that gives me a lot of inspiration and hope that, all the different turns I've taken, that you still can just show up on that day and make something, that is just meaningful for you. And it just does it for himself. And it's so amazing.
That is amazing. That is amazing. I think it's probably true that like everyone has that little conversation in their head about like, their trajectory and, times when they want to give it another shot. When you look at the length of your life, I think everyone is trying to keep track of a trajectory and seeing when they can either get out of the situation they're in, or either that, or they're doing it right now. They're giving it all they have because they know there's going to be a time when they can't,
I love that. That's beautiful. And, and that's what I've really enjoyed about moving into being a yoga therapist and taking those practices and philosophies and principles into my teaching and in my own practice. What I loved about Kundalini, it was what I needed so much at the time. I still love it. It was just like in my face, 180 degrees, going in a different direction, building all this energy, creating, new passages, new pathways, new grooves. And it's still one of my favorite practices. But what I do with yoga therapy is we try to change the trajectory now by just a few degrees. And when I'm working with somebody or even myself saying, the trajectory that I'm going, if I move it out a year, 5 years, or however long, this is where I can maybe anticipate it's going to go. But if I change it just a little bit, just a touch, where can it go? And so I can start making just little changes today, which I find for me are more sustainable than just going, I'm going to practice the guitar now for 4 or 5 hours today.
Yeah.
Eventually, it's like, okay, let me get a little bit and a little bit more, a little bit more.
Yeah. That's, when you're trying to recover or when you're going through something in life, you're thinking like, what's the quickest way out of this? Like I'm in a dead end, but life is such a long game that even those like little micro adjustments to your habits can over a year, 2, 3, 5 years, do so much. Just the thought processes. And I've noticed this in a negative way. Like if I've dropped a good habit, let's say in the last 5 years, there was a time when I stopped, meditating in the morning. Like I was religious about meditating every morning and then just decided, let's see what happens if I stop doing this. I stopped doing it for like 12 months, 18 months. And I felt like I lost all the progress that I'd made, like spiritually, mentally, emotionally. And so that proved that was a good habit. So I picked it back up and it was, like picking up anything. It's hard to do again in the very beginning, but that proved that habit. That proved that was worthwhile. And so, yeah, I think we all have those things.
Well, I like what you said there, that you kind of proved that this works for you. And I think that's one thing in yoga. We have this word called shraddha, and shraddha means faith. And, a lot of people come to yoga and they don't want to talk about the faith that they grew up with. So using the word faith has some maybe negative connotations. And so we were even talking about this last night in class, is developing faith around smaller things. And how do you develop faith is by repetitive action and observation. And when I do that, what am I feeling in my mind, body, and spirit? And so if I repetitively eat good meals this week, and how is my body responding? I've built faith that the time, the money, the effort it takes to eat good meals is going to give me this condition, this response in my body. I can start small like that, and then I can start to see, just like you, I've done that a lot of times. 40-day sadhanas, I've created the habit, I've done this thing. And then I get to the end, and then you stop cold turkey, and then all of a sudden life gets like hectic again. It's like, what just happened? And it's like, oh shit, it's the sadhana. It's that daily commitment. It's that, what I think of it as like a tithing to yourself. And when I tithe to myself some time, then I've got that return on the investment to have a little bit more capability to have ease in my life, that resiliency we talked a little bit about the other day.
I know you're enjoying the podcast, so I want to give you the opportunity to follow me at AntPStyle on social media everywhere, and at WeAreGodXP everywhere. I look forward to seeing you there. Be blessed. Absolutely. I think another thing I realized was we all have a sadhana, and you don't have to meditate to have a sadhana. Like we only have so much time in a day, and what you do is pretty much the same thing every day. Very little changes. So you can meditate or not meditate. You still are ritualistic about your life, and the rituals you practice determine you. Like that becomes you. So I realized that my sadhana is everything I do, and so the bringing conscious effort to keep a practice, a spiritual practice of some sort, it carves out your identity in ways that you don't realize until you don't have it.
Yes. I love that. And, you said it right there. Everything you do is your sadhana. We say that everything you do is yoga. Yoga is so much more than just the postures, and if you're conscious in what you're doing, what a beautiful practice that you're just doing it.
Right.
I'm conscious. I'm aware. I know where my breath is. I'm seeing how it responds in my body. I'm sitting here like before this, I was working with a customer, and they're a little agitated. They had a lot of stuff going on. And when things weren't going right, his response was that way. And I'm like, whoa, I'm feeling that in my body. Okay, so what can I do to mitigate my own self, but also give them the opportunity to have some expansion? So not responding in the same way that it's coming at me, but taking a breath, seeing where it's happening, seeing the initial trigger that shows up in my body, and then seeing what we can do to change that. And that's a deeper practice for me right now than being able to sit for 20 or 40 minutes or whatever in meditation. Not that that's wrong or right or whatever, but everything I do that is conscious becomes a daily practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally. And it kind of reminds me of when I was a kid, and I was always trying to pray and be with God as much as I could when I was in my alone moments. And I was always so perplexed how I could have so much like a passion, love, or desire for God in a prayer. And then as soon as I'm done, like start thinking about, immediately something else. You see like booty, or you have to poop or something, like you're immediately back to being a human. And well, that's still how it is. I mean, I think meditation is such a good habit because it trains your mind to quiet down, which solves so many other problems in your life that come from just snap reactions, So it's like you say, it kind of gives you that space of presentness, an awareness of presentness throughout your day, throughout your life. It increases that awareness level that you have to the present moment, so that you're not trying to rush into the next thing or dwelling on the past thing,
That's, you know, it reminds me, and I'd love to hear more about your background with religion, but just that hymn, just a closer walk with thee, you know, it's like daily walking close to thee, you know, and I was the same way. It's like, let me do my meditation, let me do my prayers when I was in a different system, and then just say, screw all that. Now I'm off and running, and you better keep up with me, you know, or if not, it's like, I don't even think of you. And that to me was, you know, as I got older and on the path, is like, even with yoga, is like, that's bypassing so much of what spirituality is. It's like, I got to take this everywhere.
Yeah.
And I forget. And then I find myself in this, but you know, with enough training, with enough sadhana, with enough mindfulness, you recognize quicker, you observe yourself going, oh, there's that guy again that likes to respond, that likes to be belligerent, that likes to argue, likes to defend. And then you just stop and pause and go, well, there is another way to respond here. Um, so I love that. Let me hear about your upbringing. I bet you there's more parallels there.
Yeah. You know, my parents, raised me in a Baptist church, but they just took me to church on Sundays. They were pretty new to their Christian faith, and maybe had been practicing for 10 years before I came along. I'm the youngest of four, so I came along a lot later. I was 11. We visited my sister's church, which was a non-denominational church down the street, and they had a missionary, and she was talking about her trip to Kenya that she took by herself, and was evangelizing and doing a lot of radical things. And I felt like my gut, my intuition, she said, who wants to go with me the next time I'm taking a small team? And so, yeah, I raised my hand, and my mom was like, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm supposed to do this. And so she said, well, go up there, you know, thinking I wouldn't do it. And I went up, and they prayed for me, and like I ended up going. So that was like my introduction to, I believed in God as a young child might. I didn't know where this could take me. And so I went on this trip and did evangelizing for a month to homeless children and remote tribes, and came back, and, you know, just had to live, you know, in my small town, going to a public school, you know, trying to deal with having a spiritual life and being, you know, in the world. And I was just like everyone else. It didn't pull me away from being a human being. But I still had this running thread of wanting to serve God and know God. And I've written a lot about this, but, you know, that's like an ongoing thread in my life, was coming back to faith and trying to know God, know truth, and know my meaning. And so I kept trying to serve and doing missionary work. 14, 19, went to Mexico. Then I went to Korea. I was in this grisly car wreck 4 days before going to Korea on a missionary trip. I fell asleep at the wheel in the middle of the day. It kind of felt like a spell was put on me, because there would be no reason for me to fall asleep. And I hit a truck head on, rolled through the intersection, miraculously survived. I was okay, but I woke up in the hospital about 3 hours later, and I had this transcendent experience when I wrecked. My soul left my body. I floated up, and I saw a supernatural exchange between spirits, I guess, like over the crash scene. And then I come back into my body, and I wake up in the ambulance. They're cutting my pants off, and I'm like, am I dead? And they're like, no, you're not dead. But I couldn't open my eyes. And like, I just kept feeling the life basically coming in and out of my body. Woke up in, they're putting me in the MRI machine, just like in a movie. Like, they're wheeling me through the hall of the hospital. And then I wake up like 2 hours later in the hospital bed. I barely remember my name. I didn't have my phone on me, and couldn't remember like anybody's phone numbers. So I laid there for a couple hours, and I finally got a hold of my parents. I figured out their phone number. So I miraculously survived this car wreck. Then I go to Korea 4 days later. I still go, because I'm like in this like high of being miraculously still alive. Right. And so I'm trying to use it to like reinforce my faith. So I'm like, yeah, I'm still going to go. And I'm like walking on a cane, but I'm in Korea just doing like evangelism and stuff for a month with a buddy of mine. But there's this like all of a sudden this lingering, there's this like there's this fog of doubt about my existence. Like I'm all of a sudden unsure what the hell just happened. Why did I survive? And why hasn't God told me anything? God didn't say a thing. So I'm walking around, from 11 to 19, talking to God all day, every day. And this horrible thing happens, but I'm miraculously alive, but like there's no explanation. Over the years, like I'm still trying to play in bands. They're Christian metal bands. So I'm trying to like be an evangelist and be a leader to this group of guys. But I have this like existential post-traumatic stress like building up. And I told my girlfriend at the time, I'm like, hey, I've got this thing. I don't know what it is. I didn't have the language for what depression felt like or what it was, but I just had like depression slowly growing over about 4 years after that. And I self-sabotaged the band and the relationship and my career. I started doing hair when I was 19. So I just kind of threw it all away and was like I was living alone, was in this suicidal state. And I told my mom, I was like, hey, I got to get some help. So she had a therapist, that friend that she knew from work. She worked at a public school. And I went to go see the therapist like the next couple of days, which sort of helped. It gave me someone to talk to about what was going on without feeling like I would be judged. That's kind of a big deal. People say therapists don't do a lot, and I can't say he did a lot, but that alone is kind of a lot when you're in that situation where you don't even want to say like, I don't know why I'm here. So that kind of led me to psychedelics. I started meditating, and around that's exactly when I was going and doing that busking thing. So that's when I found Kundalini yoga, which introduced me to meditation. That was really all I needed, to kind of get going again. I redesigned my life just with a piece of paper and started reading a lot of books, and that self-transformation journey led me to starting God XP and documenting my self-realization journey and developing more confidence with sharing that kind of stuff. Then I published my book, Get Your Mojo Back, which is like a self-help book, but kind of breaks down my story and how I got here. And just trying to weave my story back together in harmonious ways. And I'm 31 now. I feel like I've experienced enough to know what I want to pursue. Yeah. And that's what I'm doing, man. I'm just going all at it.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. That's so amazing to be out there in service and then have such a traumatic experience that seemed to be kind of the catalyst to kind of wake up to see, what is beyond this. And then that depression thing, I can so relate with it. It's insidious. And, I've struggled with that even to this day. It's not like something that goes away. It's just, I address it. I handle it differently. I have different responses to it. But to continue to move forward like you did, and then to find like the Kundalini at that time when you were just so ready to have that. That's awesome. That's so cool. If I can bring back that thread, it seems like, the practice of yoga brought me back to having a deeper relationship to Christ, to Jesus. And one of the things my teacher told me once is, she was raised Baptist. I mean, you've been raised for so many years around a faith-based system that has a lot of power to it. And then you kind of move over to another system. You may not be attuned enough to really feel all the energetic powers that has. And so as I found that there's really not a lot of difference between Hinduism, Islam, I found that I can go back to my relationship with Christ, with the God of my understanding. And and I got to this point of having this relationship with Christ, and maybe this was a little bit of something that you felt after your accident. Like, I'm here with you, God. I'm trying to do all this work in your name. Sometimes I feel like, where the hell are you? Where the hell are you? And why is it like so hard, so tough? What am I missing? And sometimes it seems frustrating, but inevitably, if you stop and listen, there is a path. And I don't know, it just sometimes it's like, you're doing this, trying to be in conscious contact with it. And for me, it's like my blinders is on. I'm not hearing the messages. I'm not seeing the direction I'm supposed to go.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how I felt. And I think that's how so many people feel. So many religious people feel, is their faith that they're in is not giving them either the technology or the devotion that they seek. And it wasn't until I had the faith, the courage to explore what else was out there, in other faiths, and what other aspects of God I could experience. And as soon as I did that, as soon as I gave that dogmatic approach to life up, I was able to realize immediately that God was everywhere. It's just, how do you want to taste it? And there's an abundance of God. God is everywhere to realize. And I didn't know that. I was so limited, even though I had all this devotion, all this passion and fervor for God. It was just, the one thing missing was a technology. And depending on the faith, maybe you have technology but no devotion or no love, or whatever culture that one religion might be missing. And maybe at different time periods, that same religion was in a totally different space. I feel like today there could be so many practices that Christians could adopt that would renew and restore and revitalize their faith and their walk. And that could be said about all religions, I'm sure.
I love that.
Yo, I'm glad you're enjoying the podcast, but I think it's important for you to know that there's a free weekly newsletter as well. Find out when the next podcast comes out as soon as it does. Get free discounts on upcoming events, products in the God XP store, and some additional spiritual wisdom as well. Look, it's completely free. Go to godxp.substack.com and leave your email, read past episodes, leave a comment and a like on some of your favorites, and we can be in touch there. I appreciate you for listening to the God XP Spiritual Fitness Podcast. Enjoy the rest of the episode.
I sometimes, my parents, they're in their 80s, I'll go to their church we were raised in, and I'll sit there and I just see the same, approach to things. I don't want to say it's a dying thing, but, like the congregation's getting older, there's no life force that is like, wanting to spark the freshness of young people's minds. And then the preacher will get up there and have some pretty damn good things to say. And I'm like kind of thinking, man, if I could be doing some sun salutations today, I could embody this shit. And it would really feel, instead of just kind of putting it here, let me put this these concepts, this faith, this energy into my body. And that's what I love with yoga, and how I teach yoga and how we teach it here at Temecula Yoga is we bring an empowering theme at the beginning of class. It's almost like a little mini sermon. And then with that idea in our minds and in our breath, we move our bodies and we have our meditations, and it just becomes so powerful.
It is.
I had saw lots of therapists, and just to the point where, man, if I needed a prescription, I could go in and tell them exactly what they want. And here's your Ritalin, whatever. And when I got out of treatment, I saw this Native American therapist. He was a clinical therapist, but he was totally different. We would talk. I'm behind, hands on my shoulders. I know you're not supposed to touch as a therapist, but he didn't give a fuck. And we would talk a little bit, and we would just breathe. And we'd breathe. And I had maybe 3 or 4 sessions with this man. And I remember telling him I had started my yoga, and I just said, James, I just feel like what's in here is also what's out here. And we're about halfway through the session that day, and he just put his pen down. He says, okay, we're done. And I go, what? Don't we have time left? And he's like, no, we're not done for the day. We're done now. Keep following your path of yoga, and you won't need this anymore. And I was like, I've never had a therapist not say you're done. It's like, come on back next week, or time's not, it's like, I got a new car to buy. It was just, this man just said, affirmed by breathing, meditation, yoga, introspection, query, all these types of things, that you'll have great mental health.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's basically my call to service, is that even over all these years, I still can't forget where I was when I needed something like that really bad. And it's just a shame that you can't consume enough information and knowledge in one lifetime, but there's just, so much power to self-alchemize, to change, to get out of a situation in life, or to experience more of life, to experience more of God in a way that people just for lack of knowledge suffer.
Yeah, and I think, we need to look at these light bulb moments that happen in our life with you, the accident with me, the hitting the bottom of my life with drugs and alcohol. And these are times where, the spirit is saying, you're ripe for change. You want to continue doing what you're doing, or, you know, bounce and come back and try something different, try something new. And to look for these things that happen continually through our life. And they don't have to be so traumatic, such as an accident or deep, dark depressions or alcoholism, drugs, or anything like that. It is something that is sticking with you, that this thing has shown up. And it's like that's an invitation to continue to maybe look elsewhere or look inward, look at other ways of dealing with stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think I've always been quick to change, like quick to realize when I've done something wrong and feeling like I have to fix it. And I see people in life who suffer and suffer, and I think, if I suffered like that, like how could I not realize like that I need to change? But we all have I mean, you could call it a karmic destiny, but we all have like a certain pain tolerance or a pain threshold. And sometimes it just, your life has to get shitty enough that you realize it's time. And some people can take a lot of pain.
Yeah, right.
It took me having 4 years of depression and hitting rock bottom in that mental state to change my life. But some people suffer for 20 years, 30 years. And it doesn't have to be depression. It could be, alcoholism or any kind of addiction, or addiction to emotions that just ruin your life.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And sometimes, people don't even recognize that this is not the norm of their life or of life, of what, whether it's a physical pain, back, shoulders, neck, whatever, or, mental, emotional suffering. And then even if they start to get an inkling that not everybody feels this way, oftentimes, well, what the hell do I do about it?
Yeah.
And then like, my dad, like back pain. Okay, doctor, maybe you should try yoga. You go to the wrong yoga class, or it's not something for you. And it's like, that wasn't the right thing. And I think it has to just line up that I'm willing. And once I'm willing, then I think spirit, universe, karmic destiny, whatever, starts to give us these opportunities, and just willing to try something.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think when I got on the road to recovery myself, I started to read a lot of books. And the first book I read, I picked up, that changed my life. And I wasn't a reader at all. I have it sitting here. It was The Greatest Salesman in the World by Og Mandino.
That's like an old book, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. I just, I picked it up. I had nothing, and it was so transformative. And I'd never had a self-help book in my life. I'd never read anything, and I thought, if everyone could just read this book. But so many people have read this book and thought nothing of it, I'm sure, But for me, in the moment, this was like the Bible. It was like God gave me this book, And it could have been probably any book, but it was just that moment in which I made a decision that I was ready to accept. I guess it's like you have to be humble enough to become a student of something, and a true student that doesn't hold on to the ego that judges the thing, that tries to prove it wrong. But like, you're so humble that you're ready to make this thing God in the moment. Like,
love that.
That's what this book was for me. But I tried to give this book to other people, and no one wanted it,
One of my teachers, Harish Wallace, is a great tantric scholar. He says that all spiritual teachings reside within you, and at the right moment they evolve upward. And so whether it is this book that is like Greatest Salesman, and that, how can that be a spiritual awakening? It doesn't matter. When it's ready, it shows up. And to that point I was making like earlier, how like the practices of yoga, and chanting become like your friend as you walk through life, and you use them at different avenues that life has. When I read a spiritual book, any book actually, but a spiritual book, where I'm at in life, I'll pick up the different things, because they're so
right.
so full of stuff. And then I could read it again a few years later, and it's like, when did they add this section? And it's like it totally resonates with you too. And so that humbleness, that willingness to be always the student, what can I learn here? I think it's a great approach.
It's like not easy either, because even consciously knowing that, I still build ego around things and refuse to be a student, or I want to be a teacher, so I can't be a student, I guess could be what it is. But once you start to develop a competence, you lose that important element of the humility, that a student needs to truly learn. And it doesn't have to be a person. You could have that bias, that unconscious bias toward anything in life, really.
I love that. One of my Kundalini teachers during training, old guy, new Yogi Bhajan, he's 40 years in the practice. And I'm like, I am going to learn so much. And Sunday would be the day he would give his lectures and he would take questions and answers and stuff. And, probably his answer to most everything people would ask him was, I don't know. I was like, fuck, man, I'm not getting my money's worth. And it was only years later that I'm like, if you don't know, why are you making something up? That was the ego, because I would do that too. I'm a teacher. I'm supposed to know everything. I'm sitting here in the front of class. I've got to know how the hip works and this works and how energy works and spirit works. And I don't know the answer to that is such a beautiful way of being curious to say, well, what can we learn more about that? Instead of like, it's this, and you just...
Yeah. That's like a statement that, there was no ego there, It's like the conscious awareness was there, and that's what was telling you the truth. There was no falsehood there, and that is enlightening in and of itself. That is a sermon, a scripture that you could a mantra that you could carry with you a lifetime and gain so much enlightenment from.
Right?
Just, I don't know. Like, that is so profound in itself.
I know, and it's taken me a while to get there, because I always felt like I had to know. My job in computers is like, I'm a one-man shop. I gotta know every fucking answer, and I gotta know what's here. And it's always been the weight on me. I have to just stop and go, wow, number one, even in the computer world, I could say I don't know, and there's a whole thing called Google that will tell you what other people might know.
Yeah.
And then in the the teaching world, the realm that we're in, and sharing this gift is like, how most of the time my students are my teachers, and what I see them coming back to me with these concepts, and whether they're physical, mental, or emotional, it's like, oh my God, you just taught me something. And just to be willing to be in that place of like, I don't know how it is for you. Here's how it is for me. And then what can we learn here? It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. That is so beautiful about working in this space, is getting to connect with people on the heart level, and not just, in the mind, intellect, like in your computer job. Like we were talking about before recording, just like how when you move from a business meeting to a yoga class where you're about to teach, like you immediately have to go from up here to here and open up, and just that whole world of intellect just falls away, and you can't bring that. It just serves very little purpose when you're in this space where people show up to be open, and so that is one of the gifts of working in this space, is when you're healing or teaching some kind of spiritual practice or any kind of wellness practice. I'm sure it's so much about vulnerability and connection, and that is a gift for sure, to be able to spend more time in that space than you would if you were just slinging a shovel,
Yeah. For me, I take a lot of time before I teach class. I don't try to do something in the headway right before I get ready. When I teach, it's like, I really got to get to that place. And so I do some practices that just questions myself. I go through these 5 questions on how am I feeling and what am I experiencing on these 5 layers or 5 levels. And that kind of gets me into just recognizing what's my stuff and what could be potentially projected on other people. And
that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. What would be like your advice to a yoga teacher who is going through a dry spell? Like what has been some ways that you've dealt with like dry spells in your teaching where your practice has suffered, or it's just becoming stale, or you don't feel like teaching, but you've had to persevere through that? What are some tools that you've used?
Great. First of all is I always teach from what I know. So I always, my teacher trainees, what do you know? You go in there sometimes and you've got this teacher that's teaching you, and they got such a strong voice, and they've got maybe a really good handle on anatomy or the chakras or something. And, maybe that's not your jam, but you still are trying to emulate them. So what do you know? And when I think as we get older, we sometimes see, like I didn't come into teaching until I was, in my 40s. Did I have to have 20 years of experience? Is like, so what do I know? So what motivates me? What am I currently going through in life? What are my challenges? And so what I try to teach is what is the most personal that you can convey can become the most universal. Then regardless of if you've had that similar experience, you've still had other triggers of emotional, mental stuff that have had a similar resonance within your body. So get back to being authentic with you. And, some of the things like it gets like, what do I teach today? Are we doing arm balances? Are we doing hip openers? Are we doing back bends? I used to do this is we teach around here on 5 principles of alignment. So different physical aspects. I would put a random number to these and I'd roll some dice, and then just trying to be spontaneous. It's like, okay, I rolled the dice. I'm going to teach hip openers today. Ugh, it's my least favorite. Okay. And then it's going to be on this principle of alignment. So I need to like do that, and then try to just stretch your mind into things, because just within everything else, we get into patterns. I'm really good at teaching this and I don't teach that. So I stay away from those things. But try to just be a little spontaneous. So be authentic, be spontaneous, and be playful. Have fun.
Yeah. I think so much rigidity for me has come from wanting to be good like the teachers I love, and wanting to be like them, and at least to have the impact that they had on me. And so, you start projecting all of these extraneous things. And I think teachers find very quickly that you can't keep that up. Like you couldn't teach every day like that, because you're having to create a whole script about, things that you don't know. And so, yeah, I love what you said, that it's just so important to be authentic and to just constantly push yourself to find new ways to grow. And when you're on the path of teaching, I think when you first get on the path of teaching, you think it's going to be super easy. And then you realize just like this mountain of things that you don't know. And so you might become very self-conscious about your teaching. And there's a whole road that of competence to go down. And so, I think realizing that it's a lifelong journey of being a good teacher and becoming a better teacher,
And I think just like, in musicianship, we practice enough so even our bad days don't sound bad. But, there are days when you're on, and there are days when you're having to work a little harder. And it's the same with yoga. Last night's class, that freaking big class. And I'm like, oh, man. And I was having a rough day yesterday. And, at the end, people are like, oh, I feel better. And who cares?
Yeah.
How you got, just get out of the way.
It's like we were saying earlier, just being yourself is the enlightened state. And that being yourself is it. Like if you can get past the mind of just trying to project something that you're not, that's when all the truth can come out,
That's beautiful. Yeah. That's when the truth can come out. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it's a challenge to be a teacher, but it's also can be like the easiest thing in the world sometimes. And when I recognize that I'm not just an entity of myself, that there's probably other people that have had stressful days, that are questioning things, that have uncertainties, that have fear and anxiety, that also have joy and laughter and those types of things. And just to allow that to be present, and to not have to be this perfect person like you're a teacher. No, I'm just human like you. There are no pedestals. We're teacher, student, teacher, student.
In the culture of yoga, there's just like this enlightenment thing where you feel like you have to be perfect. And that's what everyone's kind of seeking. And that's the target. And so you expect like a teacher to have this like perfected, virtuous state. I think that's the projection, is just wanting to be our best selves. And when you're not, just pretending to be your best self. And that's where the inauthenticity can come in.
And students know, whether they know it consciously, they know it subconsciously. And the more you show up authentically, whether you're in the greatest of moods or the shittiest of moods, they recognize that, and that gives them this subconscious permission to show up just as they are and to be loved and accepted for that. And that is the indescribable marketing thing of how do you build a class? Well, you can't advertise about that. Hey, come to the Authentic Yoga Studio. No, you can get people in the door, but to keep them there, you have to continue to be just yourself. And believe me, sometimes I'm a yoga snob. When I take yoga, I'm like sitting there judging. And when I just stop and just receive what the teacher is doing, it's like, oh my God, this is so great. I didn't need this big long mat. I didn't need these super crazy poses. I didn't need any of this. I just needed what you were giving me, and to be open to that.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so true. Yeah, I think it goes back to that student thing of just, realizing that you can make a teacher out of anyone if you're open, And that's something my dad always told me. He told me like, if you're truly wise, then you can learn a lesson from a 3-year-old. And that always stuck with me. Like, my dad has always had sagely advice. I don't know where it came from, but like those little things always stuck with me. Like, be humble enough to listen to advice when you get it, even if it's coming from a 3-year-old,
Yeah. Yeah. One of my business partners, she's been doing yoga since she was, 18, whatever, in college, and she's, 40 something now. And she was one of my primary teachers in asana skill. And I was just like, wow, I'll never have that. And I'll never have what she has, but she'll never have what I have, and just show up as you. It's not about time spent. It's about showing your true self, your authenticity, whether you got a year teaching or you're new to it. And that's the hard thing. It's just to be you.
Yeah, I think that's the paradox of it, is we look up to these people who are being themselves and we try to be like them. But the reason we love them is because they're being themselves.
I want to be like you because everyone loves you. It doesn't work.
Yeah, and all they say is be yourself. That's the advice.
Yeah.
That's profound. That's very beautiful.
I've studied deeply a number of modalities and can incorporate them, but you do find that there is one set of practices or path that continues you to go a little bit deeper into that. And I like, for me, being jazz and rock and all these types of musical modalities, and then kind of taking that and making it your own. I find that learning these different modalities give you another insight into, especially when working one-on-one, what's going to work best with someone. Because I'd love to give somebody a 40-day sauna. Let's do breath of fire for 8 minutes or whatever it is. And that's not where they're at. So then I kind of look in my yoga toolbox and I go, oh, we need this type or that type. But for personal practices, for myself, and that is really on, based on some of my more intimate areas of study that I like to go deep with.
Yeah, that's been one tricky thing that I didn't expect, but once you get really close to teaching, you kind of put a pause on it and you think, wait, do I know this? Like, am I really going to impart value to people? Sometimes I'm too patient.
Move forward, man. That one woman in a wheelchair roll up to you, you on this path you're on right now. Imagine what you get to do with people.
For sure.
And it's a beautiful thing. Sometimes, you get graced every now and then as a student, as a teacher, when a student comes by and just says, that one thing you said that caused me to look at things completely different. Like, what did I say? And it's just, those are beautiful moments that you get that little hit of reward. Not that you look for that, but it's just like you're sharing their story of your wheelchair person.
Yeah,
You never know
totally.
the effect you're going to have.
And those people have such a huge impact on a new teacher. Like just one word of encouragement could get you through a whole year. Just one student coming back and saying like, hey, like you might not even know that they were a student, but just something that you said or did just made them like, that little bit makes it all worth it. It's just like when you're in a band and only 5 people show up to your show, like you still are so super stoked.
Right.
So you guys do teacher trainings, you do classes. So how's that going with the teacher trainings? Is that something you do regularly?
Yeah, we took a pause on teacher training. We were doing 200, 300-hour. We just saw that in this area here, there was just an influx of a lot of studios doing that. And we're very particular how we taught. So your 200-hour with us would take you a year, and people didn't want to spend a lot of time. So we had a lot of mature people coming in, people in their 40s and 50s that wanted to do the teacher training, that weren't looking to make a career out of teaching. They just loved what they were experiencing in classes, and they wanted to go deeper with their understanding. So what we do now is we just do more workshops and advanced studies. We teach along the lines of Ayurveda, of yoga therapy. We have a meditation teacher that's been a TM teacher for 40 some odd years. So with our community here, we're not looking to get more 200 or 300-hour teachers out there. I think that other people are doing that and they're doing it good. We want to have the ability that people want to enhance what they've already learned in the 200 and the 300-hour realm, to deepen their own personal practice. And if they are teaching, to carry that into their teaching. Additionally, with that, a lot of our community are professionals that are working in their trade of choice, and we're giving them tools to help with their team building in their regular work, to incorporate some movement or breath practices, to utilize philosophies to get through whatever it takes to get through their jobs. So kind of a practical approach to what we're imparting in kind of a training way right now.
Nice. I like that. Some advanced or further discipleship and education, that people can pursue. I love Temecula. I never lived there, but I lived near there for a while, and would go on the weekends. Every time me and my girlfriend drive to San Diego, we always make sure to go the back way through Temecula and stop in at Old Town. Love that town.
Well, we'd love to have you here in Temecula, so we need to talk about after your Riverside experience, which I hope to make it to this Saturday. I just saw the newsletter go out from Mora's studio, and you were featured in there, so that looks cool. And I got to read a little bit more about your bio that she had put on there. I was talking to my business partner, Ashley, and I was like, yeah, I'm doing a podcast with Anthony, and he's a live looper. And so it's like, yeah, sign him up. Come on.
Sick. Sweet. Yeah, no, I can't wait. It's going to be a blast. Yeah, I'm playing this weekend on Saturday for people who don't know in Riverside, so I'm very excited about that. And yeah, I can't wait to come to Temecula and play for you guys. It's going to be a blast.
Love it, man.
We'll do that in November sometime. Danny, so like last things, I mean, I'm sure we could do this for 3 hours, but just wanted to like try to pick your brain a few rapid fire things. Like what would be your advice for, we did yoga teachers, but just anyone on their spiritual path, just trying to find their way. They don't have any culture or technology, and they're just getting started, feeling the things that come with struggle, suffering, and just looking for a way out. What would be your advice to a person on day one?
Woo, really paying attention to how you feel in your body. Yoga is about embodiment, and sometimes we think about not paying attention to how important the body is. I want to kind of get out of the body. I'm more than the body. I'm more than these aches and pains. I'm more than the illness. But the body is this great vessel that is receiving all of the energy around there, whether it's conversations, things you watch on TV, your food, your interactions with people, and you'll feel things in your body. And to start to try to pay attention to sensations in your body and see how that feels. And then that will help you decide, like when choosing a modality or a practice or a studio or a teacher, how do I feel when I'm here? If you don't feel comfortable in our studio or you're here, I don't want you here. I want to maybe know why. Can we do something? But maybe, there's a better place for you. So as you're looking to find these places, listen to the body, especially the gut area. It can tell you so much. That's just like, I feel settled. And when you feel that settling, you get that little moment of settling, then kind of lean into that.
Yeah, that's really good. And for artists, musicians, just finding a way to use that outlet in life, what is your advice?
Do it for yourself first. Be as authentic as you can be to what you want to hear and play and learn and study and present. And I think the more that you have that authenticity, you'll attract people that want to listen to you. You also attract people that want to collaborate with you, and you'll attract places that are in alignment to you. There's a lot, at least for me, there's been a lot of doubts along the path of music and what this is for. Ask yourself, why are you doing it? Are you doing it to get? Or are you doing it to receive? Are you doing it to serve? Or are you doing it to fill an empty spot within you? These are all pitfalls that I've run into. And so I can tell you that when I'm doing it as an act of service, as a way of connecting, as a way of communicating, then that is the most rewarding experience I can do with music. And so to try to get into that alignment has been helpful for me.
That's huge. And last thing, how can we support you? How can we support Temecula Yoga Collective, the Clapping Monkeys? What's the best way for us to reach you and keep in touch?
You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook. The Clapping Monkeys are found on both. Our Facebook is facebook.com/the Clapping Monkeys. That's helpful. Same with Temecula Yoga. I think our Instagram is Temecula Yoga, and that works also on our Facebook page. Just talking about, your podcast, coming down and experiencing us, letting us experience you, we start to just create this symbiotic relationship that's just like, hey, what's Anthony doing now? And is he going to be around? Let's have him back. Is Danny and, any of the monkeys traveling up north? Can we, see what's happening there? And just keeping the conversation alive.
That's great. Yeah, that's awesome. We're going to do this again. We've got so much more to talk about, but we could do this all day. So we'll definitely have you back on in a couple of months. We can do it again, and I can't wait to head down there and play for you guys. And we'll definitely film that and put that up for everyone to see. So, Danny, bless you. Thank you so much. It's been an honor. It's been very insightful, profound, and just very honored to have you. And just very appreciative of your time.
Pleasure's mine, my friend, and keep doing what you're doing. It's awesome.
Everybody, Danny White. Have a good one.